My name is Jessica Hayes. I walked into our 20-year high school reunion wearing a simple blue dress. Within minutes, I was reminded that, in their eyes, I hadn't achieved much. The person at the door barely noticed me. I mumbled thank you, held my small bag, and stepped through the big doors of Lakeside Manor. The fancy lights in the lobby sparkled, just enough to make you feel like you didn't belong. Everyone was already inside. I could hear laughter, clapping, and the clinking of glasses even before I got my name tag. It said Jessica Hayes in plain letters. No job title, no special mention, nothing important. My sister, Sarah, was probably behind that. I still wore my special ring under my sleeve, but no one saw it. That's exactly how I wanted it. The main hall looked like a theater stage. Long tables with white cloths, flower arrangements with shiny crystals, and a huge cake sparkling on a stand. At the front, a big screen showed old photos. Prom, debate club, cheerleaders, our class trip. Sarah was in half of them. I was in maybe 3. Sarah Hayes, my younger sister, was already on stage when I walked in. She wore a bright red dress that screamed power. Her voice filled the room with easy charm. And after 15 years at the City Hall, I'm proud to say I've recently been made Deputy Director for Local Projects, she said, tossing her hair with a laugh. But I'll never forget where it all began, right here at Northwood High. She added, and of course I have to thank my sister, who is with us tonight, for always being uniquely herself. The crowd chuckled, unsure if it was a real compliment. I didn't react. That was Sarah's skill, making a compliment sound like a jab. I found my name at a table far away, table 14, near the food and close to the exit. The names at the front tables were written in gold. Dr. Miller, CEO Chen, Senator Davis, Sarah Hayes. I sat down at my table, which had no decorations and a half-eaten shrimp cocktail on a shared plate. Across the room, Mark Stone saw me. He hadn't changed much, still tall, still too confident. He walked over, drink in hand, his suit perfect. He leaned in with a smirk that hadn't grown up. "Jess," he said smoothly, "still working in some remote place? Or are you just doing paperwork in some small town now?" I smiled tightly. "Nice to see you too, Mark." He laughed. "Come on, I'm joking. But seriously, didn't you study law? What happened?" Before I could answer, a woman nearby whispered loud enough for me to hear. Didn't she drop out of law school? Such a shame. So much promise. Emily Chen caught my eye from 3 tables away. She gave a small smile. I returned it, unsure if it meant pity or understanding. Probably both. The dinner crowd grew. Waiters moved smoothly, serving steak and potatoes. Sarah stopped by with big fake hugs and sparkling teeth. "Oh, Jess," she said, "glad you could make it. I almost didn't recognize you in that old blue dress." "It's just a dress," I said. "Well, you always were practical," she tilted her head. "You know, we really should talk sometime. You've got so many stories, I'm sure." "Only the quiet ones," I replied. Mark returned, with 2 other classmates. One, a tanned woman in a light blue suit, squinted at me. "Wait, were you in the military? That's right, I remember. You left after your 2nd year to join up or something." A man behind her barked a laugh. "Wait, you were in the military? So what, like a secretary or a cook?" Several heads turned. Some laughed. Mark looked amused. Sarah didn't say anything. I took a sip of water. The glass trembled slightly in my hand, but I held it steady. The air suddenly felt heavy, like gravity had changed in the room, but I didn't let it pull me down. I stood up without a word, adjusted the sleeve that hid my special ring, and looked at each of them with a calm I had gained over 2 decades in important meetings and hidden bunkers. I smiled faintly, quietly, replied, "Something like that," then walked to the balcony where my secure phone buzzed silently. They saw a nobody in a simple dress, but I had once given important briefings in that same dress, just under a military coat they never knew existed. The wind outside swirled around the balcony, as if trying to listen in. I stayed out there a while, my back straight, eyes on the dark treetops swaying above the park. The resort lights cast a golden glow on the grass, but up here, where no one cared to stand, it was quiet. That kind of quiet was rare in my world. Inside, the noise of success stories grew again. Laughter, toasts, another photo sliding into view. Sarah with the debate team. Sarah in front of the city hall. Sarah at a fancy university. The door behind me opened with a soft sound. "Mark, there you are," he said, already halfway through his next drink. "You always did like standing on the edge of things." I didn't answer. He leaned against the railing, too close. "You know," he started, his voice casual, "you really used to have a future. Top student, debate star, a great university practically begging. And then, poof, military." Laughed. "Still can't understand that." His laugh hadn't changed. Same proud, clipped sound. Same need to feel one step ahead. It took me back to the last time we stood this close, our final year. The dorm hallway still smelled like coffee and laundry soap. I had told him I'd joined the military. "You're kidding," he had said, his jaw tight. "The military? You're throwing this away?" "It's not throwing away," I'd replied. "It's choosing something bigger." "Yeah," he snapped, "bigger than me." And then he walked out. No goodbye, no call, just vanished. Now, 20 years later, here he was again, still upset about a choice that had nothing to do with him. "I didn't disappear, Mark," I said, my voice calm. "I just stopped explaining myself." He scoffed. "You always did like mysterious answers." I turned to go, but he caught my arm gently, just enough to make me stop. "You could have been someone, Jessica." I looked at him. "I am someone, just not someone you'd recognize." Before he could answer, the door swung open again. "Sarah, Mark," she called, using that fake, cheerful tone she used when she wanted to be overheard. "They're asking for the golden trio picture. Come on, for old time's sake." Her eyes flicked to me and her smile widened. "Oh, Jess, didn't know you were still here. Thought you might have left early like usual." Mark dropped his hand from my arm. Sarah came closer, looping her arm around his as if it had always been there. "Anyway," she continued, brushing an invisible speck off Mark's jacket, "everyone's dying to know what our class's only City Hall appointee and its most successful real estate developer have been up to. I told them, you two are still deciding who wins the power couple crown." She laughed, but there was something pointed in her glance at me. Mark chuckled awkwardly, clearly unsure if this was flirting or a show. Sarah's eyes sparkled. "And Jessica, what are you up to these days?" "Still somewhere warm," I said simply. "I'm in transition." "Oh," she said, with mock concern. "Not out of work, I hope?" "I manage fine," I replied, "just not from behind podiums." She tilted her head. Always so mysterious. Her smile tightened. "But I guess not everyone likes the spotlight." She turned, tugging Mark back inside, her heels clicking with satisfaction. I stayed there a moment longer, letting the wind thread through my fingers. The bar lights from inside painted slivers of gold across the floorboards. I wasn't angry. I'd spent too many years learning how to feel everything and show nothing. Eventually, I walked back into the hall. The room had shifted into after-dinner mingling. Smaller groups now, more drinks, looser tongues. Emily was at the edge of a group near the bar, sipping wine and watching. I joined her. "That was painful," she murmured. I smiled faintly. "Which part?" "All of it," she replied. Then added, "You look better than them all, by the way." I doubt they'd agree. Doesn't matter. Truth doesn't need a majority vote. I appreciated her. She didn't pretend to know everything, didn't rush to fill silence. She simply observed. Across the room, Sarah leaned in close to Mark, whispering something that made him laugh. When she caught me watching, she didn't look away. She just smiled. "Didn't she used to follow you around like a shadow?" Emily asked. "She learned to outshine me instead," I said. Before she could respond, a gentle hand touched my shoulder. I turned. Mr. Daniels. He looked older, grayer hair, thinner, but his eyes were just as sharp as they were when he taught history. He wore a blue jacket, khakis, and that same crooked half smile that used to come before a surprise quiz. "Miss Hayes," he said warmly, "I was hoping you'd be here. I heard about your military service." I nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels." "You wrote a paper on secret warfare in my class," he said. "I still remember it. Brilliant work. I blinked. That paper had been a late-night act of defiance, written after a phone call with Mark had left me in tears. I remember, I said softly. He leaned in slightly, his voice lower. Tell me, did you ever serve in shadow ops? I've heard things. They thought I disappeared into nothing. In truth, I disappeared into national silence. I locked the hotel room door behind me, exhaled slowly, letting the buzz of the reunion fade into a faint hum beneath the thick walls. The room itself was plain. Fake crystal lamps, cream-colored carpet, a folded bathrobe on the bed. It looked like it could belong to any guest. That was the point. I slipped off my heels, crossed the room, and reached under the hanging blue dress bag. Beneath it, nestled inside a black, unmarked hardshell case, was the reason I still woke up every day with purpose. I flicked open the latches. The inside glowed faint blue. A fingerprint scan, eye scan, voice check. Hayes, Jessica, clearance Echo 5. A soft chime. Then the screen lit up. Secure comms online. A rush of information filled the display. Threat alerts, unfinished plans, Project Phoenix status, active breach containment. I quickly read the latest report. 4 red zones, 2 possible inside threats, 1 breach point matching the blueprint I'd found. Incoming call, Delta Command. I tapped the screen. His face appeared. Square jaw, dark stubble, eyes like he hadn't slept in 2 days. Ma'am, he said, not wasting time. I've just come out of a meeting. Situation's changed. They want your eyes on the Phoenix intercepts ASAP. I didn't blink. Joint Chiefs, unofficially. Officially, it's an advisory consult, but let's not pretend this is critical. We've got a partner nation compromised, and inside talk linking the breach to Mercury protocol files. A pause. Then his voice softened slightly. Jessica, they need you back in the capital by Monday. I stared at the blinking map. 4 red zones. Yes, but there was a 5th just starting to pulse. I can't leave yet, I said quietly. Understood. But if this escalates, it will, another voice cut him off. It's already in motion. He looked at me like he wanted to argue, but didn't. You've got 48 hours, he said. After that, we extract, whether you're ready or not. I'm sending intel briefs to your secure cloud. The screen flickered as the call ended. For a moment, I just sat there, the glow of the case humming beside me. The hum had become a comfort, not because it was peaceful, but because it meant I was still needed, still in the fight. A chime. New secure message. Central liaison. Subject, urgent. Update line, direct extraction possible if urgent. You're the fulcrum. I closed the message. I already knew what it meant. If Phoenix collapsed and the intel leaks spread to public systems, it wouldn't matter whether I was dancing in a fancy dress or kneeling in a war room. I would be pulled out. The fulcrum wasn't a title. It was a tether. I stood, stretched, then walked to the window. Outside, the lights of Lakeside Manor still sparkled like a painting too perfect to be real. I could hear music again, soft jazz now, followed by a DJ's voice booming something about a class slideshow. 20 years ago, I'd sat in that auditorium with Mark, Sarah, and Emily, listening to our top students speak about legacy. I remember clapping politely, even smiling for the yearbook photo. I never imagined my legacy would be silence. 15 years ago, Shadow Ops went on a mission so sensitive, we burned every scrap of planning material afterward. We succeeded, but at a cost. 3 agents never came home. Their names didn't make the news. I gave the final go order on that operation. I was the youngest to do so. No medal, no award, just a single line in a secure server. Operation completed. No attribution, debrief sealed indefinitely. I carried those silences like medals no one could see. Now they needed me again. I turned from the window and began to pack. Not much, just the case. 2 devices, and a dress uniform folded beneath a false bottom panel in my suitcase. My fingers lingered on the coat sleeve where a single silver star rested just above the cuff. I didn't plan to wear it yet, not until I was ready. I have one thing left to settle before I leave, 48 hours. Outside, music from the reunion resumed. I looked out and murmured, "One last night in the shadows." I wore no medals, but I carried more scars than anyone in that ballroom. The ceiling of the grand hall shimmered with thousands of glass fragments, casting golden specks over polished tables and champagne glasses. The room buzzed with practiced nostalgia and perfect success, like everyone was playing a role they had waited 20 years to perform. The class of 2003 had aged into their power suits and practiced laughter. I sat near the back again, table 14, flanked by two former athletes, now in business, and a woman who ran a beauty empire. None of them remembered my name. They smiled politely, then turned back to each other. I didn't mind. It was safer this way. The band hushed. The MC, a balding man with a booming voice who had once been the prom DJ, stepped to the microphone. And now, he beamed, our highlight of the evening, the 2003 Most Distinguished Alumni Award. The votes were unanimous this year. She's smart, accomplished, and a rising star in public service. Please welcome Deputy Director Sarah Hayes. The applause was thunderous. Sarah walked onto the stage as if it were built for her. Her red dress caught the spotlight perfectly. She took the mic with both hands, pausing long enough for the room to quiet. She didn't look at me, but her voice reached every corner. Thank you all. I'm honored and a little stunned. I mean, I'm just doing my job, but I guess over time we see who rises, who leads, and who simply watches from the wings. Laughter, polite and measured. She continued, I want to thank my mentors, my team at City Hall, and of course my high school teachers, especially those who encouraged ambition over just fitting in. They taught me that serving is admirable, but leading? That's where real change happens. Another ripple of applause. She smiled as if she had just solved a riddle, then added, I think we all know someone who chose to fade into the background, and that's okay. Not everyone wants or can handle the light. I didn't move. My face didn't change. But I saw Emily look at me from across the room, not with pity, but with something sharper. Disbelief. Mark, a few tables up, stood with his wine glass raised. To Sarah, he declared, our own Iron Lady, proof that leading from the front beats hiding in the shadows, unless you're peeling potatoes on a base in the middle of nowhere. That got a laugh. Even from people who didn't understand the joke, they just followed the rhythm. Sarah smiled modestly, as though the toast embarrassed her. Emily didn't clap. I looked at her again. She was biting her lip. The MC returned. Let's hear it for Sarah! And hey, any generals in the room tonight? No, guess not. Well, maybe next reunion, huh? Laughter again. I rose quietly. No one noticed. I slipped between tables, my heels silent on the carpet. Mark called out after me. Hey, Jessica, wait, I didn't mean… I kept walking. There was nothing left for me to hear. The hallway was cooler, dimmer, far from the lights and perfect memories. I moved past framed photos of our senior year, homecoming, school plays, award nights, and into the entrance area, where the air held less expectation. Outside, the night wrapped around me like armor. The sky above Lakeside Manor was velvet black, dotted with stars I hadn't seen for days. I took a breath. Then my secure phone buzzed in my bag. Extraction cleared. Helipad, ETA 6 minutes. They said my life had amounted to nothing. But then the sky began to shake. I stood alone near the edge of the lawn, past the fairy lights and music, past the area where photographers had stopped shooting and voices had softened into polite networking. Beyond the garden arches, the night was quieter, cooler. My heels pressed gently into the damp grass, and I tilted my head upward to watch the stars. For a moment, they reminded me of the sandy nights overseas, of field maps lit by moonlight, of a silence that meant danger, not being ignored. Behind me, the echoes of the reunion still lingered in the air. Sarah's acceptance speech, Mark's wine-soaked joke, the MC's final laugh. In their eyes, I had already left the story. Unimportant, forgotten. I once told Emily years ago, I don't need them to clap. I just need them to see. I hadn't meant for that moment to arrive this way. The wind shifted. A low rumble started, soft at first, barely noticeable from the hum of generators and distant traffic. But it grew. Waiters paused mid-step. Someone looked up. A few guests glanced around, puzzled. Then the lights on the grass flickered, replaced by harsh, strong beams from above. A sound cracked through the air like thunder. People gasped, trays dropped, glass shattered, napkins flew. From the northern tree line, a dark shape emerged, sharp, precise. A military helicopter, matte black, cutting through the sky with accuracy. Its rotors thundered as it hovered above the lawn, lights blazing into the crowd. Screams of confusion, phones out. Someone yelled, "What's happening?" A mother pulled her child close. Mark shielded his eyes. Sarah's champagne glass tilted, spilling gold down her dress. The helicopter began to descend, rotors kicking up a whirlwind of leaves and petals. Guests stumbled back as hair and ties whipped in every direction. The music stopped playing. Cameras flashed, not out of joy now, but confusion, fear. Then it landed. The door opened. Colonel David stepped out in full dress uniform, ribbons gleaming under the floodlight. His boots crunched the gravel path as he crossed the lawn, head high, pace unhurried. He didn't glance at the crowd. His eyes were locked on one thing: me. I didn't move. I stood straight, arms at my sides, the wind pulling slightly at my blue dress. For the first time that night, I didn't feel underdressed. I felt exactly as I needed to be. David stopped 3 feet away, squared his shoulders, and saluted. Sharp, deliberate, perfect. Then he spoke, his voice projected over the stunned silence. "Lieutenant General Hayes, ma'am, the headquarters requires your presence. Immediate briefing." The words hit the air like an explosion. Someone gasped. Another dropped a phone. A wine glass shattered. I heard Mark's voice behind me, barely above a whisper. "No. What?" Sarah stumbled back a step, her mouth frozen open, her eyes wide and glassy. Emily was the first to move. She stepped forward, breath caught, then whispered, just loud enough to carry, "Oh my God, Jessica." They all froze as David said the words, "Lieutenant General Hayes." I had never spoken my title aloud in public, but now it roared through the silence like thunder. The last vibrations of the helicopter blades rumbled through the earth like an aftershock. The air had gone still again, but not silent. This was the quiet of stunned disbelief, of minds failing to understand what eyes had just seen. Colonel David handed me the folder, black, sealed. His voice dropped just enough for only me to hear. Target movement confirmed 2 hours ago. Headquarters wants eyes on. Intercept recommendations. Phoenix's window is narrowing. I nodded once. Anyone dead? Not yet, but that won't hold. From behind him, I heard Sarah's voice crack through the frozen silence. Wait, did he just say, "General?" All eyes shifted to her. She stood barefoot now, having lost a heel in the chaos, clutching her bag like a lifeline. Her dress sparkled beneath the floodlight, but her face was losing its shine fast. "Jessica," she repeated, her voice rising. "You're in the military, but I thought you thought I was peeling potatoes in the middle of nowhere," I said, calmly. Mark stumbled forward, still gripping his wine glass as if it might anchor him. I didn't know," he said. General, I had no idea. I thought you dropped out. Law school, military, I didn't even." He trailed off as the camera started flashing. Emily stepped beside me, her hands trembling. "I don't understand how you hid this." "I wasn't hiding," I said. "I was serving." Somewhere in the crowd, someone started clapping. Just a few hands, then more. A ripple of confused, unsure applause rose and faded like an orchestra missing half its instruments. But it was enough. I took a step toward the center of the lawn, where voices had started to rise, in whispers, questions, fragments of disbelief. I didn't speak loudly. I didn't have to. "Some people wear uniforms loudly," I said. "Others wear them quietly. That doesn't make us any less visible. It just means we serve without needing to be seen." David gave a nod toward the helicopter. "Ma'am, ETA 1 minute." I turned to Emily, her eyes shining now, not with pity or confusion, but with awe. "You really are the fulcrum," she whispered. I smiled faintly. Sometimes silence is a blade. Mark tried again. Jess, please, can we talk? I was wrong. I didn't see you. That's the thing, I replied without turning. You never tried to. Sarah stood off to the side, arms crossed, chest heaving. Her expression had frozen, not in embarrassment, but calculation. As the crowd shifted, phones raised, and whispers became captions, she quietly pulled out her own. One quick swipe, she opened her podcast app, tapped record. This is Hayes, she began in a low, controlled voice, live from Lakeside Manor, where some very interesting truths are unfolding. Behind me, the rotors kicked up again. David guided me to the helicopter, and the ground fell away beneath my feet. As I climbed aboard, flashbulbs snapped, faces blurred beneath the growing cloud of wind and debris. Some still clapped, some stood frozen, some pulled out their phones. As we lifted off, I caught one last glimpse through the window. Sarah, eyes burning, still recording. By the time my boots touched headquarters ground, the internet had lit up, and Sarah's voice was already echoing across my inbox. The secure door sealed shut behind me with a pressurized hiss. Inside the quiet room, the silence was thick, heavier than noise. The digital haze of Lakeside Manor had been replaced by concrete walls, muted lighting, and the hum of threat maps crawling across classified screens. I shed the last fragments of reunion perfume at the door. Here, it was sweat, data, and urgency. Colonel David briefed me while walking quickly past rows of computers. I was already scanning the contents of the secured tablet he'd handed over. Logs from a breach near a server farm, half-matched codes, suspected false information linked to Phoenix. General Wilson is waiting, he said. I didn't pause. We turned into the operation room. At the end of the room stood Wilson, imposing, unreadable, his chest covered with a career's worth of awards. Hayes, he said, his voice tight. I've seen the chatter, both from inside and outside. You still good? I'm focused, sir. Good, because I need your eyes on the disinformation. This one's political and personal. He passed me another file. A projection flicked on behind him. Maps lighting up in pulses. Timelines crossing with trending topics. Last 48 hours, he said. Phoenix's breach patterns match the sudden viral trend involving your name. Civilian networks picked up a podcast that blew your profile wide open. I stiffened. Sarah. Correct. The episode's called My Sister the Myth, released less than 12 hours ago. Already re-uploaded by 24 other media channels. I didn't need to listen. I knew the rhythm of her voice, the precision of her passive aggression. We need to talk about military narcissism, she'd once joked years ago over wine. Now she was building a brand around it. Wilson continued. She accuses you of using your rank for attention, calls your headquarters presence a narrative move, claims you ignored your own family and now return in full uniform to steal the spotlight and the public. I sighed. You've got veterans calling her ungrateful, but influencers are picking it up. Social media edits, online debates, hashtags trending, hashtag Sister in Shadows, hashtag Jessica Warrior, or PR. I exhaled slowly. Sir, I'd prefer not to engage. You don't have a choice, he said. The civilian information system has become a secondary battlefield. If someone's tying your name to Phoenix, it's not just gossip, it's a chance for chaos. I nodded. Understood. He looked at me, something unreadable flickering in his expression. You know who you are. Just don't let them redefine it for you. Back at my desk in the secondary hub, I scanned my secure inbox. There were over 90 media requests. Famous news anchors, big magazines, even a funny late-night host who wanted me to read mean tweets in uniform. I ignored them all. Below the requests came the other flood. Comments, hate mail, messages calling me a fraud, accusations that I faked my rank for a public stunt. Some even said I was an actress, not a general. One video looped me stepping into the helicopter. The caption, Deep State Cosplay. I rubbed my temples. A red alert pinged on my screen. Civilian disinformation sensor flagged Jessica Hayes as active target, risk level 45. Initial vectors traced to fake news outlet, Citizen Circuit. Source uploaded hours after podcast drop. She hadn't just called me out, she'd fed me to the wolves. I stared at the screen. Sarah didn't understand what she'd unleashed. Or maybe she did. A message pinged from my personal line. Emily Chen, voice note. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her voice came through, low, fast. You need to hear this, Jessica. I just talked to Mark. He told me something about Sarah, something she deleted years ago. I think it's connected to what's happening now. You need to know. I thought silence would shield me, but sometimes silence gives liars all the room they need. The windows of my temporary office looked out over the headquarters courtyard, but the view offered no relief. Everything felt too bright, too sterile. The walls were lined with framed awards and a clock that ticked with military precision. But time didn't feel straight today. It bent, curled around memories I hadn't thought about in years. Mark sat across from me, his knees bouncing slightly. He was wearing a suit, but his tie was loosened, and his expression was worn. I should have told you sooner, he said. I should have said something back then, but honestly, I didn't think it mattered. I watched him carefully. He looked like a man about to confess to something bigger than he could handle. She came to me right after you joined up, he said. Sarah. She said you had asked the school to keep your name off the alumni honors list, that you didn't want the attention. I didn't question it. I tilted my head. You didn't think it was strange? He hesitated. I did, but it was Sarah. She was always so sure, so calm. She made it sound like she was protecting your wishes. She even forwarded an email chain to the school board asking for the removal of your name. Said it was for consistency, that since you'd left the top university path, it might confuse the narrative. The narrative, I repeated, the words slicing through my teeth like glass. He looked ashamed. I didn't respond to the thread. I didn't stop it. I just let it happen. I stood slowly, walked to the file cabinet behind me, and placed a hand on its cold metal edge. Something inside me wanted to scream, but training teaches you to wait, to observe, to strike with purpose, not impulse. She erased me, I said softly. Not just from dinner tables or party invites. She erased me from history. Mark looked down. That's not all. A knock at the door. Emily stepped in, holding a folder with both hands like it weighed something sacred. I found it, she said, walking in. The nomination form, your Medal of Honor file from 2018. I stared at it. I thought the board never submitted it. They didn't, she said, but not because of paperwork. She opened the folder and slid out a printed email, old, grainy, but readable. At the top was Sarah's name, her city hall address, and her signature at the bottom. Subject, Medal of Honor, Submission, Lieutenant Gen J. Hayes. Note, General Hayes has expressed a strong desire for anonymity. Please do not pursue further recognition without direct consent. My jaw tightened. I never wrote that. I know, Emily said, but she had access, and she was your emergency contact at the time. I blinked. The weight of it pressed into my ribs. Emily added, she told the nomination committee you'd withdrawn your consent. The board dropped it without ever contacting you. Mark's voice was hollow. She didn't just remove your name from a list. She removed your name from legacy. I turned away, swallowing a sudden sting in my throat. It wasn't just jealousy or rivalry. Sarah had created a version of me so small, so invisible, that even my victories vanished under her approval. A soft vibration buzzed from Mark's phone. He checked it, frowned, then looked up at me. She's planning something worse, he said. Sarah's organizing alumni. She's calling it a restoration effort. A vote to block your new nomination from going through. Says it'll protect the integrity of the alumni brand. I met his eyes. She's rewriting the past, I said. But I'm still here, and I still remember. Being forgotten is one thing. Being rewritten, that's war. The reunion auditorium smelled faintly of lemon polish and old carpet, the scent of manufactured respect. Rows of folding chairs had been neatly arranged, adorned with maroon ribbons and tiny gold seals bearing the class of 2003. I stood at the back, arms crossed, my military blazer buttoned cleanly over a cream blouse. I hadn't been invited, but today wasn't about invitations. It was about presence. On the stage, Sarah adjusted the microphone. Her smile was precise, her movements practiced. She wore a tailored ivory suit and pearl earrings. To the untrained eye, she radiated calm. Success, she began, is not about medals or mystery. It's about showing up day after day, about building something others can trust. Applause rippled through the crowd. Alumni, current students, a few media. Reporters scribbled notes, camera phones flicked up. She continued, "My sister once said she preferred to serve in silence. But silence can be misleading. Silence lets myths grow in the cracks of truth." A murmur rise. Someone near the press section whispered, "Wait, isn't her sister a general?" Sarah smiled faintly as if she hadn't heard. "Real leadership," she added, "doesn't come from titles. It comes from showing up when it matters." Emily found me near the side aisle and pressed a manila folder into my hand. "It's all in there," she said softly. "Department of Defense acknowledgement, the nomination memo, and that photo." I nodded as Sarah wrapped up with a line about legacy built on clarity. I stepped forward, voices hushed, a few gasps, chairs creaked as heads turned. I walked up the central aisle. My boots echoed sharp against the carpeted wood. The alumni board chair, an elderly man with tired eyes and a silver tie, noticed me, his brow furrowed. "Lieutenant General Hayes," he said, his voice unsure. I met his gaze, requesting 3 minutes at the podium. Sarah had frozen. Someone from the press whispered, "That's her, that's the sister." The chair hesitated, then gave a slight nod. I climbed the steps. Sarah stood to the side, lips tight. I didn't look at her. I faced the crowd. Hundreds of eyes, a mix of awe, confusion, doubt. I didn't speak. Instead, I opened the folder. From inside, I pulled out a single photograph. Me, in full dress uniform, standing at a command center. I was saluting, a silver star gleaming on my shoulder next to a high-ranking general, the day I'd received a classified commendation no civilian had ever seen. I held the photo up high and steady. The room went utterly silent. I didn't need applause. I just needed 1 second of their attention, earned, not demanded. I lowered the photo slowly. The room remained still, a breath held tight in collective lungs. From the edge of the stage, Emily gave a small nod. I stepped forward. "My name is Jessica Hayes," I began, my voice even, unshaken. Class of 2003, first chair in orchestra, founder of the Global Studies Club. Voted most likely to be a professor. That one didn't age well. A soft ripple of laughter, tentative. I continued. "I served because I believed in a country that didn't always believe in me. I didn't wear a name badge for approval. I wore one to remind me of purpose." From my folder, I held up a thin packet, copies of operation briefs with hidden names, letters of commendation, the nomination record Emily had uncovered. These are parts of a life lived beyond this room. Not glamorous, not loud, but real. I didn't look at Sarah, though I felt her presence like a vibration at the edge of my back. Instead, I scanned the crowd. Faces I once knew, students watching from the aisles, reporters hovering near the exits. "I won't name names," I said, my voice firm, "because this isn't about anyone else's story. It's about mine. About those who serve quietly, who show up not for attention, but because not showing up would mean someone else might pay the price." I paused, then added, "Some of us protect in silence. That doesn't make our stories invisible." Camera shutters clicked. Someone near the front wiped at their eyes. "I'm not here for praise," I said. "I'm here to remind you that truth is louder than applause and far harder to silence." I turned slightly, letting my eyes land just over the crowd. You can erase names from walls, but not from memory, and certainly not from history. With that, I stepped back from the microphone. No music played, no loud cheers, just something deeper, a respectful hush. I walked down the stairs, passing rows of alumni and students, some leaning forward, some blinking away surprise, others nodding slowly. As I reached the back of the auditorium, the alumni board chair stepped onto the stage, clearing his throat. He adjusted his glasses, glanced toward me, then spoke into the mic. "It's time we corrected a mistake. General Hayes, your name belongs on our wall. When the call came from the president's office, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, but ready. The early morning hum of the headquarters was always the same. Hallways too wide, lights too white, footsteps swallowed in a rhythm of purpose. My office sat tucked behind layers of security. But that morning it felt strangely exposed, like the silence knew. Colonel David entered without knocking, a rare gesture of respect. He carried a sealed folder, blue and gold, marked Executive Notification. He didn't speak at first, just placed it on my desk and stood back. I opened it slowly. The President of the United States takes great pride in awarding the Medal of Honor to Lieutenant General Jessica Hayes for acts of valor above and beyond the call of duty. The words blurred slightly, not from emotion, at least not the kind people expected. I wasn't crying. I wasn't smiling. I was absorbing. It's public, David said. Next week, White House lawn, full ceremony. I nodded. Who else knows? Media's embargoed until… Emily's outside. I looked out the glass. Emily was pacing with her phone, earbuds in, scanning headlines. I opened the door, and she spun around. Have you seen it yet? She asked breathlessly. The articles are everywhere. The silent general. She led, she vanished, she returned. Even the main paper has a front-page spread. She pulled out her phone. Listen to this quote. She carried the burden of command without ever asking for a podium. Now the country insists she stand on one. She looked up at me, eyes bright. Jessica, it's happening. I managed a small smile. Feels strange. Strange like I've been underwater for years, and someone just turned on the sun. Her expression softened. You earned this. Before I could respond, my secure line lit up. A presidential liaison officer came on the screen. Young, polished, rehearsed. General Hayes, the president would also like to discuss a defense advisory role for civilian-military integration oversight. You'll receive formal documentation by week's end. I blinked slowly. Thank you. He nodded. And congratulations, ma'am, on behalf of the nation. After he disconnected, I stepped outside, not into the crowd, just down the side path behind a building where the night sky lingered a little longer in the shade. I walked without direction, hands in pockets, boots silent on gravel. No cameras, no salutes, no one calling my name. Just breath and air and memory. Near a low bench, I stopped, sat, looked up. So this is what being seen feels like, I whispered. Strange. The wind rustled nearby trees. Somewhere, a distant car door slammed. When I returned to my quarters, the lights were still off. A small envelope sat on the floor, slipped neatly under the doorframe. No stamp, just a name in elegant ink. Return address, Sarah. I opened Sarah's letter, expecting damage control. Instead, I found a memory. The envelope had no embellishment, no logo, just my name written in her steady, looping cursive. Inside was a single card with faint watercolor borders and 4 words in the center. Can we talk? Below that, a place and time. Sunday, 10:30, the quiet corner, downtown. No fancy words, no manipulation, just an ask. That morning, the cafe was quiet, its windows fogged from the cold, the hum of the espresso machine the only background music. I arrived early, ordered black coffee, and sat in the corner booth by the window. Civilian clothes, no uniform, no rank. Sarah arrived 10 minutes late, alone. She wore no makeup, her hair tied back in a loose braid. Her eyes were rimmed with fatigue, but not from lack of sleep. This was emotional weariness, the look of someone who had stopped pretending to win. She sat across from me, didn't ask if she could, just did. For a long moment, we said nothing. The clink of ceramic cups and distant murmurs of baristas filled the space between us. Then she slid a small velvet box across the table. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photo, aged at the corners, slightly faded. 2 girls, maybe 8 and 11, dressed in matching Halloween camouflage costumes, both saluting. You kept this? I asked softly. I almost threw it out, Sarah replied, but I couldn't. I looked at her. She wasn't performing. She wasn't building a narrative. I spent 20 years trying to outrun your shadow, she said, her voice low. Turns out, I built that shadow myself. I didn't respond. I just let her talk. I thought if I was louder, more visible, I could catch up, she said. But no matter what I did, there was always you. Quiet, constant, and I hated how much I resented it. I hated how much I admired it. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her cup. She didn't lift it, just held it. "I didn't want you to disappear," she whispered. "I just didn't know how to exist next to you." For the first time in 20 years, I saw the sister I'd grown up with. Not the polished lawyer, not the media expert, just Sarah. The girl who used to crawl into my bunk during thunderstorms and whisper, "Don't leave first." I reached across the table and laid my hand gently on hers. Her breath caught. "Then maybe now," I said quietly, "we stop running." It wasn't about medals. It was never about medals. But standing on that stage, I finally let myself feel proud. The air on the White House lawn held a kind of stillness that felt rehearsed, ceremonial, and unbreakable. A white canopy stretched across the center of the space, flanked by rows of seats in tight military symmetry. Uniforms gleamed, flags fluttered. The orchestra played softly in the background, subdued, respectful. I stood at attention, my service blues immaculate, every ribbon and bar aligned with years of silence. My gloves were crisp white, my spine a line of steel. Beyond the platform, hundreds of eyes watched. Cadets, generals, senators, families, and somewhere in the third row, Sarah sat beside Emily, hands clasped, face unreadable. She clapped with the others. No fanfare, just presence. The president, a man with an unshakable calm, approached the podium. "Today," he began, "we honor not just a soldier, but a guardian, a woman who walked through 20 years of conflict, diplomacy, and secrecy, not seeking fame, but protecting others from its cost." He paused, scanning the crowd. Lieutenant General Jessica Hayes chose silence. But it is time we speak her name aloud. It is time we say thank you. The audience stood. Applause rang through the lawn, not thunderous, but steady, grounded, earnest. He turned, took the blue ribbon from the box. With slow, practiced care, he placed it around my neck. The gold star gleamed in the spring sunlight. For the first time in a long while, I allowed my chest to rise fully. Somewhere in the crowd, a child clapped louder than the rest. A veteran near the back removed his cap and held it to his chest. As I turned to walk down the steps, a young cadet in dress grays stood rigidly at the foot of the stairs. She couldn't have been more than 19, her chin lifted slightly. "Thank you, ma'am," she said, saluting. I returned the gesture with a nod, saying nothing. I reached the podium again, this time for words. "I used to believe silence was strength," I said quietly, "that to serve meant to disappear. But I've learned something else." I paused. "We don't serve for applause. But sometimes it's good to know we were never truly invisible." The applause came again, softer this time, thoughtful. I turned back to the president, offering my hand. He shook it firmly, then leaned in, his voice low but firm enough to carry only to me. "You're not done yet, General." They offered me a desk in the main government building. I chose a classroom at Fort Unity. The lecture hall wasn't grand, just beige walls, scuffed floors, and the faint hum of old air conditioning. But to me, it was perfect. 30 cadets sat at attention, notebooks open, eyes alert. The nameplate on the podium read, Lieutenant Gen J. Hayes. But the title mattered less now. I was there to teach, not to impress. Today's seminar, Ethical Leadership in Difficult Situations. We'll talk through real-world problems, how to lead when no one's watching, how to act when the rules are unclear. One cadet, sharp, with freckles, maybe 20, asked, "Ma'am, what do you do when the system works against you?" I met her gaze. "You lead anyway," I said, "and you document everything." They laughed softly, but they understood. These young women weren't here to play dress-up. They were preparing for the reality of pressure, failure, and quiet victories. I saw myself in all of them, and hoped they'd have easier paths, but no less courage. Midway through the afternoon, a knock at the back. Sarah, no makeup again. She wore jeans, a blue jacket, and held a small camera bag. She gave a sheepish wave as I approached. "Hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "You're on campus?" I asked. "I'm working with a team on a documentary series, Women in Command. Thought I'd start where I should have started years ago." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a long way from podcast snark." She shrugged. "People change." Before I could reply, Emily appeared behind her. She grinned, holding up a book mock-up. Leading in silence, lessons from the field. Publishers interested, she said. They want co-authors. UN? I looked between the two of them, my sister and my old classmate, both reshaped by truths neither of us had planned to face. I nodded once. Let's write it right. Back in the classroom, the cadets had gathered near the front. One held a large poster board, drawn in colored markers, figures in uniform, medals, and in the center, my face, half shaded, half lit. At the top, in looping cursive, Our General. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thank you, I said, my voice thick. Then, clearing my throat, I addressed the class. Command isn't about shouting. It's about showing up when it's hardest to. They nodded, scribbled, sat a little straighter. As the session ended, I returned to my desk. A single red light blinked on the secure tablet in my briefcase. I opened it. Subject, Shadow Ops Meads Eyes. Request Urgent Cyber Task Force. High Threat. Clearance Code Black. I stared at the message, heart still but ready. I didn't disappear. I was simply doing my job where you couldn't see me. The hallway smelled like freshly varnished wood and printer ink, new but familiar. The banners were maroon, the same color they'd always been, and the school's seal shimmered in gold on the wall near the entrance. The Hall of Legacy was modest, quiet, just a stretch of corridor with nameplates carved in bronze and framed photographs beside them. I stood near the back, hands clasped behind my uniformed back. This time, there was no stage, no ceremony, just a cluster of students in pressed blazers, a few faculty members in formal wear, and alumni lining the walls with quiet respect. Sarah stood beside the podium, a single sheet of paper in her hands. She glanced up at me once, met my eyes, and then began. She served without needing to be seen, Sarah read, her voice steady. But now we choose to see her. Not for the rank, not for the medals, but because of what she stood for when no one was watching. A pause. She's my sister, and more importantly, she's someone I've come to learn from. She stepped down. I nodded slightly, not sure what else to do. Emily was there too, in a blue dress and flats, her hands holding a well-worn copy of our book manuscript. She'd flown in the night before, promising to keep things simple and boring, and I had believed her until she surprised me with a quote from our book, now printed in the event program. Leadership doesn't echo in applause. It echoes in choices. The crowd shifted as a cover on the plaque was lifted. My name, my class year. The simple phrase beneath it. Jessica Hayes, integrity and silence. No titles, no decorations, just that. Faculty gave a short speech, something about conviction, about how real power comes not from being loud, but from being lasting. I barely heard it. My eyes had drifted to the corner where 5 cadets stood in uniform, arms at their sides, proud and still. Emily came up beside me as the crowd began to murmur again, snapping photos. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. I took a breath. Not deep, just enough. "It's not about being remembered," I said. "It's about making sure the right things are." She smiled and rested a hand on my shoulder. From behind us, a voice whispered, "She's the reason I applied." I turned slightly. One of the cadets, no older than 19, was medging her classmate. Her eyes were wide, her face earnest. I didn't say anything. Instead, I stepped back from the plaque. Let them take the photos they wanted. Let them speak the words I'd once been denied. Then I walked out. The sound of my footsteps absorbed by the polished floor. No music, no cameras clicking, just silence and meaning. And after years of silence, being erased and quiet dignity, Jessica's name was finally etched, not just in bronze, but in memory. The woman they once mocked as invisible now stood as a symbol of integrity in an age of noise and vanity. Her story reminded us that justice, though delayed, can still strike like thunder, clear, earned, and undeniable. When injustice is met with quiet strength, truth becomes louder than any lie ever told. Sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to disappear to light the path for a generation. Like if Jessica's journey moved you. Comment 1 if you felt the injustice and redemption. Comment 2 if you'd have written it differently. We're listening. Subscribe and share if you believe truth always finds its voice.